Hey, 6th grade, welcome to Lesson 10. This is Lesson 10, Day 1, and you're going to explore multiplying and dividing decimals in this introduction lesson. So make sure your math book is on page 102, and if it is, let's get started. So it says you've learned about place value. You've also learned how to multiply and divide decimals to the hundredths. In this lesson, you will multiply and divide decimals to the thousandths. Take a look at this problem. So it says Ben wants to buy a baseball cap that costs $24.50. The sales tax is 8% or 0.08. 8 hundredths is the same as 8%. How much will he pay in sales tax? So just so you know, you are going to have to figure out what 8% of $24.50 is. Now, you should also know of means multiply. So you're going to be doing 8% times $24.50. Now, last, what we're going to be doing is we know 8% is the same as 8 hundredths. Oh, let me make that a little bit neater. So you're going to be doing 8 hundredths times $24.50 in this problem. Now, what I want you to do is I want you working on A through H while you pause the video. Now, do not be afraid to make a mistake. So what I want you to do as you go through is you give it your best shot. If you're not sure, you try it. And if you're wrong, well, you get to correct it when you're watching the video. All right, so do A through H. Pause the video while you're doing it. And as soon as you are done, hit play. Go. All right. So, let's see how you did. So, let's go through A through H. Remember, if you had any that are wrong, you get a chance to fix your mistakes. So, A says, how would you estimate the amount of sales tax? Now, there are different ways to estimate this one, but I'm going to show you how I would estimate it. So, I'm going to show you here on the left of that line first, and then I will explain it. So, remember, I'm going to estimate the problem 8 hundredths times $24.50. Now, if I were estimating this, the first thing I would do is change $24.50 to $25, just because that's an easier number to work with. Second thing I would do is if I were rounding 8 hundredths. Now, 8 hundredths is really close to 1/10. That 8 will round it up to 1/10. But I want to think of 1/10 as a fraction. Now, if I were finding 1/10 of a number, I would just move the decimal over to the left once, because you're just dividing by 10. So 1/10 of 25 is about 2.5, or in this case, about $2.50. So that's my estimate. Now, I'm going to write down what I did. Okay, so here's what I said. I said I rounded $24.50 to 25. And 8 hundredths to 0.1 or 1/10. I found 1/10 of 25, which is $2.50. So remember, your estimate may be different. That's how I did mine. You're welcome to use my answer if you did it incorrectly. But if yours is pretty close to 250, then keep it. All right, so now let's go to problem B. It says you can write $24.50 as 24.5. What is 24.5 as a fraction? Well, 24.5 as a fraction is 24 and 5/10. But you can also say 24.5 is 24 and a half, right? So you can say 24 and 1/2. So you can have either one of those. This one's going to be a little more useful. But if you wrote it as 5/10, I'm okay with that too. All right, if you didn't have either of those, you're going to want to fix it, though. Now, C says, what is 8 hundredths as a fraction? Well, if you say it 8 hundredths, you can just write it 8 hundredths. Now, if you reduce that, maybe you said divide them both by 2 and you got 4/50ths. Maybe you divided 4 and 50 by 2 and you got 2/25ths. So it didn't say to write it in simplest form, so I would be okay with 8 hundredths. I would be okay with 4/50ths. I would be okay with 2/25ths. You only need to have one of those, though, by the way. All right. Remember, pause the video at any time that you need to. D says, how could you show the problem using fractions? So in this one, instead of doing 8/100 times 2450, you could show this as 8/100 times 24 and a half. Okay? Now E says multiply the fractions. What is the tax? Now if you're multiplying those, 24 and a half, you would do 24 times 2, which is 48, plus 1 is 49. So you would do 8/10, 8/100 times 49 over 2. I would do a little bit of bow tie reducing. 2 goes into itself once. 2 goes into 8 4 times. So if you do 4 times 49, I know 4 times 50 is 200. So 4 times 49 is going to be 4 less, which would be 196. Now, so 4 times 49 is 196, and 100 times 1 is 100. And I could reduce that 196 over 100 if I divide 2, 1. Well, let me think of it this way. I'm going to think of this as a division problem. 196 divided by 100. I'm just going to move the decimal twice to the left and get 1.96. All right. Now, let me continue. What is the tax as a decimal? It's $1.96. So G, does your answer make sense? Explain. Well, here's what they're asking. Remember my estimate was about $2.50. So $1.96, that's about $2. So it's pretty close. So I would say yes. $1.96 is close to my estimate of $2.50. So I'm at least in the ballpark. Now H says explain how you could find the amount of sales tax Ben will pay. All right, so I'm going to talk about a couple ways. One is you could change both amounts to fractions and multiply. But you know what? You could also multiply the decimals, which we're going to talk about on the next page. But you could also just multiply the decimals. Okay, so remember, you do not need to have my exact answer. You should have it in your own words, talking about how you could find the sales tax. All right, remember, pause the video if you need to make any corrections, or rewind it to go back over anything you didn't understand. All right, now let's go on to page 103. Now here's where we're going to talk more about multiplying with decimals. So follow along here. It says you multiply decimals in the same way you multiply whole numbers. You just need to think about where to place the decimal point in the product. So it says you can think about multiplying fractions to make sense of multiplying decimals. And let's talk about this for a second, because they're trying to show you where to place a decimal point. So in the problem, 24, let me go back to here, 24 and a half could also be written as 245 over 10 times 8 over 100. All right, so that's where they're getting this problem. Now, when you multiply, to place the decimal, it doesn't really matter what these guys multiply to equal. Now, you'll see it equals 1,960, but that doesn't matter. What matters is the 10 times 100 is 1,000. Now, that's going to help us know where our decimal point is, because it's got to be thousandths. So if I write this down, 1,960 thousandths. Remember that. Now, here it says the denominator is in the thousandths place because tenths times hundredths equals thousandths. Let me show you that. If you multiply 10 times 100, you get 1,000, right? So tenths times hundredths equals thousandths. Now, down here, when you're multiplying your decimals, notice here they do 24.5 times 0.08. You get the digits 1960. So, remember, tenths times hundredths equals thousandths. Now, when you're doing decimals, here's an easy way to remember it. There's one decimal digit in the first product. There are two decimal digits in the second product. That means in your answer, you will have 3 decimal digits. Okay? Tenths times hundredths is thousandths. That's what they're talking about. Now, I'm going to show you if I am doing this multiplication problem. Okay, what I do is, remember the original problem is 24.5 times 0.08. Now, this is the way I was taught, and it's always worked for me, is I just pretend it's 245 times 8. Because you multiply it just like a whole number. You don't have to worry about lining up decimals or anything, just to get your digits. So when I do that, 5 times 8 is 40, 4 times 8 is 32, plus 4 is 36, 8 times 2 is 16, plus 3 is 19. So I get the digits, 1960. But this is where I remember my decimal places. There's 1 decimal place here. There's 2 decimal places here. So that 1 plus 2 decimal places means my answer needs to have 3 decimal places. Okay? So my answer is going to be 1,960. But I also want to tell you another way you can place your decimal. So let's say you go back and you get your digits, 1960. Remember when I estimated and I had $2.50? So think about if your answer has to be close to $2.50. It's only going to make sense to put your decimal point in one spot. So imagine, if you put it there, is $196 close to $2.50? No. Is it close to $19.60? No. Is it close to $1.96? Yes. Is it close to 19 cents? Remember, that's if you only look at those first 2 digits. No, it is not. So you can use common sense to say it has to be here because $1.96 is close to $2.50. So estimation can help you with that as well. All right, now in your reflection, it says explain why 2 hundredths times 3 tenths is 6 thousandths. Now, just so you know, I'm going to show you if you were solving this, you would do 2 times 3 is 6, right? But because there are 2 decimal places here and 1 decimal place here, your answer, your product needs to have 3 decimal places. Now notice 6 only has 1 digit. I'm going to write it over here more. So to make it have 3 decimal places, you have to add a few zeros in front of it. So that's where they're getting this answer, 3 decimal digits. All right, so now we want to know, explain why 2 hundredths times 3 tenths is 6 thousandths. Okay, now pause the video, write your reflection, 2 to 3 sentences should be fine. Restart it when you're done. Go. Okay, so let's see what you came up with for your reflection. So I'm going to explain why. So I'm going to say, I know tenths times hundredths equals thousandths. Remember we talked about that earlier? So the answer must be 6 thousandths. Okay, now remember, if you have a fraction, if you have tenths times hundredths, you're going to get thousandths. That's a good way to help you remember. But I'm also going to add here 0.02 has 2 decimal places. 0.3 has 1 decimal place. The answer must have 3 decimal places. Okay? So now, I just gave 2 different explanations in blue and red. Yours may be different and may be similar to one of those. So if you made a mistake, you're going to want to fix it. But other than that, if your answer explains how you know it, you should be good to go. All right. Thanks for watching, guys.